Good afternoon, students. Welcome to the third day of our course, of our program. We ended yesterday's program halfway through on transportation management. Now, if you see the agenda that was distributed some time back, on the first day we did some introduction and logistics decision. On the second day we had warehousing, which we completed, and transportation management. On the third day we had forecasting as well as distribution management. Now, I have deliberately added distribution management to transportation because they are very closely related. So, we will complete our distribution management and a bit of a fleet management as well, and then go on to the next subject, very interesting subject, one of my favorite subject, which is demand forecasting. Okay. There are few things before I start the program today I would like to tell you. I am very sorry, yesterday I understand that many of the students tried to access the link and reach the internship platform. Actually, that particular link had some summer internship fair, and the summer internship fair registration was closed. So, that link was deactivated. I have sent another link today morning to all our representatives or managers in your respective locations. They will share the link with you, but still I again want to share that link on the board. Just concentrate on the board. This is the link. I will just read it out for you. bit.ly/is_APSSDC. I hope this works this time. I repeat once again for your benefits, bit.ly/is_APSSDC. This will take you to the internship platform. You need to go to the internship platform. You have to register yourself, and not only registration, don't stop at registration only. Registration is all about creating an account. You cannot stop at creating an account. You have to actually apply for internship. If you don't apply for internship, just clicking the link and registration will not help. Okay? If you have any difficulties, our representatives are there at your locations to help you. Second, the study materials. I have been receiving a lot of requests to post the study materials. If you remember, on the very first day I did mention, and I am not going to deviate from that once I have completed first 3 days of our curriculum or our course, then I am going to upload the study materials for those subjects which I have completed so far. That means, today being Wednesday, I am going to upload all study materials for the subjects that I have covered on Monday, Tuesday, and what I am going to cover today. So, from today evening onwards or tomorrow morning onwards, I will start uploading the study materials for you. Okay? And that will give you sufficient time to revise. Okay? Now, we will go to, as I said, we will complete our session which we were halfway through yesterday on distribution management. Before we go, as always, we would like to recap. What did we do yesterday? It is very important that we spend at least 5 minutes in doing a bit of recap, in trying to understand what we learnt yesterday, what we discussed yesterday. In the first session yesterday, we discussed a very important topic on warehousing. On warehousing, what did we discuss? We discussed the types of warehouses: public warehouses, private warehouses, contract warehouses, bonded warehouses. Then we discussed the benefits of the warehouses. Basically, broadly, there are 2 benefits from a warehouse. Once we discussed that, we also discussed a little bit on warehouse documentation. Now, on this, don't stop. As I said, don't stop at this particular course. There are so many things to learn. Go to internet. The study materials I am going to send you will also have other sections. Try to learn more and more on documentation, because documentation is a very important aspect of, and I actually plan to send you a samples of documents which I am going to upload in the website, so that you can download and actually see how a commercial invoice looks like, how a receiving note looks like, how a delivery challan looks like, how an accounting book or accounting register looks like in a warehouse. So, different types of documents that we maintain. How does a purchase order looks like? So, all documents which are relevant to warehousing I would probably upload into the system for your study. We also discussed how a warehouse is operated, what are the various factors that are required to understand how a warehouse should be operated. What is the significance of continuous movement within the warehouse? What is the significance of continuity? What is the significance of a straight line movement? We also discussed that in order to set up a warehouse, if a company decides to buy or if it decides to operate a warehouse, what are the factors? For instance, procurement is a huge factor, initial cost is a huge factor, investment is a factor, utilities, availability of utilities is a factor, the soil is a factor, availability of power and water is a factor. Then we decide about warehouse layouts, warehouse designing. What should be the ideal height of a warehouse? 20 feet. What should be the warehouse? How it should look like? Depends upon the pallets, depends upon the kind of product that a particular company is using. Where should a particular product be placed in a warehouse which has very frequent movement? Where should a particular product be kept in a warehouse which does not have too frequent movements? We also discussed the importance of a few things, like warehouses are meant for security, right. So, there are two very important aspects we discussed just at the end of the session yesterday, which was pilferage, which is because of theft, because of leakage, how to prevent theft. Different companies are today, they are using technology to they are not doing any types of manual records. So, they are doing computerized records of all the shipments that are there in the warehouse. They do not allow unauthorized person to get into the warehouse. They are beefing up the security system. They only allow authorized persons with badges, with tokens, with documentations, etc., etc. So, different companies, CCTV cameras. So, there are different ways by which a company is trying to protect the shipments which are kept in the warehouse to stop the pilferage. Deterioration is not pilferage, it is not theft. Deterioration is basically damaging. When you damage, when a product which is kept in the warehouse do not retain its quality, it's damaged because of bad handling. And why bad handling? Because there is improper training, people trying to do shortcuts, people trying to either carry too much of a weight or too less a weight, etc., etc. So, these are the areas that we discussed on warehousing. In the second session, we started discussing transportation. On transportation, very important, we discussed the different modes of transportation, basically primarily 5 modes, that is air, sea, railways, roadways and pipeline. So, we made a bit of a comparison in terms of the cost. We saw that airways is always costlier than roadways, roadways is costlier than railways, railways is costlier than ocean freight. So, they have both as far as the price, as far as the services are concerned, we made a comparative study. We also discussed what the costs are, transportation cost, what do they depend upon? They depend upon distance, depends upon volume, density, stability, handling, claims, value of shipments, etc., etc. We discussed about ancillary cost, additional cost that is incurred. We discuss about how the cost of movement, how the cost of moving a shipment to a particular mode depends upon the distance, and we had given a graphical representation that more the distance, the cost per unit of the shipment comes down. That is the reason people use ocean freight, they use ships and vessels to move shipments between two countries when they do exports. Within the country, if it is too long a distance, it is railways, if it is relatively shorter, it is roadways. But things are changing over a period of time, because particularly in India, we are trying to also use our coastline for movement of domestic shipments. The government is trying to take the opportunity or trying to take benefit out of the extremely well inland waterways that we are having. So, many things are in the pipeline. So, things are changing. Logistics and supply chain is one subject which is extremely dynamic. So, you need anybody. So, do not stick to this particular course, do not stick to your MBA course, whatever is being taught. try to improve your knowledge every time. See the internet, see books, see journals, get into LinkedIn, discuss with people. So, because as I said, lot of things are changing as far logistics supply chain is concerned. The models are changing, the way logistics functions, supply chain functions are performed by companies are changing. Lot of application of technology, reduction of manual operations. So, after that we came to distribution. Now, what is distribution? Broadly, a company produces a product. Now, why does he produce a product? Not for his own consumption, correct? Companies generally produce a product for consumption by the customers. Now, between the company and the customer, how should this shipment move? Will it move directly from the company to the customer, or it will go via media, some retailer, distributor, wholesaler? Who is to move? Is there a carrier there, or the company is going to move it directly through its own freight system? Are they going to store the shipments in between? If it is moving from Mumbai to Delhi, is there a storage in between? Is there a merge of somewhere in between where they are going to consolidate or distribute or transship or whatever it is? So, overall we had discussed 6 options of distribution. We will start the session today in just mentioning, in just pointing out those options. So, just let us see the slide. We will quickly go through the slides. Just for a recap, we will see the different options of distribution. The first one was direct shipping. We are not going to discuss anything else. If you remember, every option, every distribution option has a cost as well as a service factor. Every. So, not all distribution has all the factors in favor of that particular distribution system. Something may be positive, something may be negative. So, we are not going to discuss that. We have already discussed that yesterday. I expect you to study when I upload the study material. So, the first one was direct shipping. Then came number 2, manufacturer storage with direct shipping. Then we had in transit merge by the carrier. I am not going to discuss these diagrams any further, which we have done already yesterday. Just for the recap, number 4, manufacturer storage with direct shipping and in transit merge. Number 5, distributor storage with carrier delivery. Then comes number 6, distributor storage, and I said that we are not going to discuss this, it may not be too relevant. Then we had distributor storage with last mile delivery. And lastly, we had an option where customer can go and pick up at pickup sites where shipments coming from factories, they go through a cross dock and the shipment is sent to a pickup site. It is not delivered to the customer either by a carrier, by a courier or through last mile delivery. The customers do come to these pickup sites and pick up the shipments. Now, since we are here, I am going to take just a few minutes to explain what a cross dock is. You can see there is something called cross dock over here. Probably few of the management students would already know what a cross dock is. Now, if this is a warehouse and this is where shipments are coming into the warehouse, and if this is the place where shipments are stored in racks or whatever it is, so few of the shipments will come to the storage area, whereas some of the shipments will get segregated and will go out. That means it will cross the dock. It will not go into the storage area. It will simply go out and shipped out. This is shipped in. This is basically cross dock. We do not need to learn too much on cross dock, because as I said, for every chapter we are only going to discuss the relevant points. Since cross dock was here, and maybe few of you are not familiar with what a cross dock is, and in logistics and supply chain management, try to visit industries Probably your institutions probably facilitate that already, but if through your own contacts or whatever it is, if you want to take logistics and supply chain as a career, it is very important that you visit some facility or the other to have a first hand, to have a practical knowledge or as to how operations happen in a particular facility. So, we go back to our slide and so more the number of facilities, the better is the response time. Quite obviously, if you have facilities which are centralized, which are far off from the market or the customers, the response time will be much larger. So, if you see the response time, if you have the higher number of facilities, the response time is lesser. That means, if you have a regional facilities, if you have facilities in every town or every state, the deliveries and response to a particular customer become much faster than. So, this is relationship between response time to a customer versus facilities. But on the flip side, you have to understand, as a logistics manager, what I have been always telling you, you have to keep in mind that as a logistics manager, you have to balance between cost and services. You have too many facilities, you increase the cost of the company. Obviously, there is a setup cost, there is an operating cost for all the facilities, correct. There is overhead cost, administrative cost, labor cost, maintenance cost. So, if you have too many facilities, of course, the customers will be very happy. They have a facility very close to you. Amazon has a facility very close to Hyderabad. So, the shipments come and get delivered very fast, but think of the amount of cost. So, the customers, the companies take a very strategic decision as to how many facilities they should have without compromising on customer service. Let us go back to the slides again. So, this is the graph which tells you about the facility versus cost. There are three costs. There is a warehouse cost. So, the shipment size or number of warehouses, the more number of warehouses, the cost will definitely go up. So, the higher the volume, if you remember, if you think of the transportation cost, it was inversely proportional to the volume or the size of the shipment. Higher the volume, lower the cost. When you add them together, when you add these two costs, these two very important cost, students, and I have said that yesterday, warehousing management and transportation management are two very important areas and cogs of supply chain management, logistics management. And what we are trying to do, we are trying to derive from this particular graph diagram, what is the total logistics cost, which is a summation of warehousing cost and transportation cost. This is the summation. If you can quickly make a sketch in your notepad, or rather than waiting for the materials to come to you. Again, there is a relationship between number of facilities, response time. So, the more number of facilities, the response time becomes better and better. But a more number of facility, the logistics cost will go up. It depends. So, if you have lesser number of number of facilities, so if you go up, if you go to the right, the response time and the number of facilities is directly proportional. Okay. So, there has to be a balanced decision, and the optimum decision is taken where the two graphs intersect each other. Excuse me. Fleet management. Fleet management over a period of time has become very important. Today, as a logistics service provider or as a company, now I have said that there are companies who manage their logistics themselves. Think of a major company like a Unilever or Asian Paints or MRF or ITC or Patanjali or Colgate Palmolive or Procter and Gamble. Think of a major company. Now, not all companies manage their logistics themselves. They don't. There is a cost involved, there is a lot of coordination involved, there is a lot of management involved. A lot of companies hate to do this management, they hate to, because think of a company like Dr. Reddy's, think of a company like ITC. Now, their core expertise is in producing certain kind of a product. It could be a consumer durable, it can be a consumer non durable, it can be a food, it can be toiletries, it can be whatever, it can be apparels, right. So, companies want to concentrate on their core function, on their core job, and not jobs which are supporting their function. So, transportation management is something which is generally outsourced to a to another company, to a logistics company. Now, whether you are managing your logistics yourself or it is being outsourced to another company, it still has to be managed well. Now, in order to manage your transportation, what is the first thing that you need to do? Who is making this transportation happen? It is the fleet. When we say fleet, what do we mean? We mean a number of trucks or a number of vehicles. A total number of vehicles make a fleet of truck or vehicles. Currently, we are talking of road transportation primarily. Okay, let's go to the to a slide. What is important in fleet management is it is a target oriented, it needs optimal planning and supervision, control of the fleet operation based on the available resources, whatever that is available to me. Few companies have large resources, large number of fleet. Now, if you go to developed countries like Japan or Australia or USA, there are companies who manage, there are a number of companies who do manage their own transportation, they manage, they own, they maintain a large number of fleet of vehicles. But even if they don't, they are outsourcing to a logistics company. That logistics company has to manage their fleet. It is about integration of organization process with modern information system. Now, you have to understand, we are talking of supply chain management. Within supply chain management, we are talking of logistics management. So, transportation and warehousing housing falls under logistics management. Now, when we say in the very first session, I did mention that logistics management is a part of the total supply chain process. So, if you see, here is a company, here is a company, then this company, for his day to day function, he has to procure raw materials from different suppliers. So, here is a supplier, here is a supplier, here is a supplier. So, he is receiving shipments from the suppliers. In turn, he has number of customers. We will only restrict to, so C1, C2, C3 like that, C4 like that. He has number of customers. Now, for movement, he needs to manage this movement, and to manage the movement of shipment both for inbound. So, this is inbound and this is outbound, which we briefly discussed yesterday. In order to do that, who is moving these materials? The vehicles, the fleet. Now, there is an integration that is required, there is a coordination that is required. It is not all about receiving shipment and just blindly sending the shipments to the customers, and the customers could be direct customers, it could be the retailers, it could be the distributors. We have seen in distribution management, right. So, the customers not necessarily is a direct customer, it can be a retailer, wholesaler, whatever it is. So, to do a proper fleet management, lot of informations move around in the system, and these informations connect. This is also a very, very integral part, and if you see the slide once again, it is written integration of organization process between two organizations with modern information system. We are not going to discuss fleet management in detail, but at least the important part. So, keep in mind the slides that I am spending time on are important, and the ones that I am going to flip or I am going to ignore or pass through may not be so important. So, what does fleet management involve? It is tracking of the vehicles, it is fuel and speed management, health and safely. Today, if you remember, we are discussing about green supply chain management. So, you have to ensure that the movement has to be safe and the movement should not create pollution. Sales order transmission, route planning, driver management, vehicle diagnostics. Driver management very important, the driver needs to be trained. There is a lot of efforts, there are a lot of projects, and there is a lot of focus given on driver management in India also, because driving as a profession, driving as of commercial vehicles as a profession is not a very lucrative job in our country. Now, if you see, transportation is so important in every country. That is the lifeline of business within a country, transportation. And can you imagine transportation happening without drivers? No. So, we need to manage the drivers, we need to train the drivers, we need to look after them. Similarly, you have to look after our vehicles as well. When you talk of large number of vehicles, there is a lot of investment that are made on vehicles. Now, improper management of vehicles is going to land up into heavy costs on fuel prices. If you don't do a proper route management, then you are going to spend on fuel, you are going to damage your vehicles for unnecessarily moving it extra distances. So, these are the basically 7 or 8 functions of fleet management. Let us go back to the slide again. Location tracking, monitor assets, prevent inventory loss. So, there are 2 types of tracking. One is a location tracking, and the companies must consider in order to locate the track how to track inventory in a smaller area and across a larger area within a particular city or within 2 cities or within 2 countries also. When a shipment is moving today, major companies do not restrict their business within a country or a city or a state. So, they move their shipments across the border, across the country. So, it is essential for the companies to track their shipments over a long distance as well as within the city or within a small area as well. They need to monitor the assets, because what these fleet or the vehicles are carrying has very large value. So, it is important that they monitor it, so there is no theft, no loss, and to ensure that the shipment reaches the market as fast as possible. So, everywhere if you see, logistics manager has a responsibility of doing a balancing act. While they have to ensure that the shipments are not damaged, while they have to ensure that the vehicles are not moving too fast, while they have to ensure they are not taking a longer route. Similarly, they also have to ensure that the shipment is delivered to a customer as per the guidelines, as per the contract, as per the commitment of the company to the customer. Okay. So, there are different tracking technologies, and we are already familiar with GPS, global positioning system. We are aware of radio frequency identification, which is RFID, attached to the vehicles, attached to shipments. So, every movement through the system, through the satellite, you can always continuously move. In inbound and outbound management, there is something called TMS. We are not going to discuss TMS in detail over here. TMS is basically transportation management system. Now, what is a TMS? TMS is transportation management system, and this is a software. Today almost every company who are heavily dependent on transportation, moving goods in the manufacturing industry, okay, they are applying TMS, this software, because this software helps the companies in various ways. This software helps the company to track their shipment. This software helps the company with lot of, this software provides a lot of data. They do contract management, because there are companies who deal with number of logistics service providers, many of them, not only one transporter, maybe 5, 6, 7, 10 transporters. Now, to maintain or to control this transporter, to manage the transporters, to manage the contract, to manage the terms and conditions is very difficult. So, TMS does it for them. Okay. TMS helps them to do smaller shipment deliveries. TMS helps to do the back end activities, because back end activities, what do you mean by back end activities? What the customer service executives would do, what the customer service team would do, track shipment, inform the customers, right. Today everything is online. Whatever you book a shipment through a particular courier or a carrier or any logistics company, you can track the shipment throughout its journey, right. And the same thing would happen with TMS, because large companies, they have to use a large number of vehicles, okay, because they are working with customers at every part of the country or every part of the globe. Now, it is absolutely difficult if the business has to grow, if the companies have to go global, if the companies have to increase the network, they have no other option but to apply TMS, transport management system, in order to properly manage. And that is the key in success of business, because producing a good quality product is not enough. To ensure that it is delivered to the customer the way the customer wants it is the key to the success of business. That is going to make the company grow. Okay. So, let us see if we have anything to discuss on fleet management. I do not think so. So, how the next slide shows how GPS works through the satellite system. The basic concept is good enough. I am not expecting any of you to know the in detail technology of GPS. You should know what a GPS is. It is a small device attached to a vehicle with a SIM inside, and through a satellite it sends back information about the shipment, its journey, its stoppages, its haltage, its breakages, etc., 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 to the company, so that the company can monitor its. So, as you see, it improves efficiency and productivity, reduce operating cost, speed of logistics activities, transparency of all transport events, automatic data transfer, optimal order distribution. So, with this we come to the end of transportation and distribution management. Now, before we go to our next section, which is forecasting, I would like to run a video for you. Now, if you remember, I have been telling you that logistics and supply chain functions are becoming very, very modern, right. Earlier, yesterday we discussed warehousing. So, this video will give you an idea where warehousing is going to, what is the modern way of doing warehousing. I am not expecting you, or probably you may not see such kind of warehouses in many places in India, but trust me, the direction that our country is going to, we will also have such automated movement, such automated system in our warehouses. We already have in different, if you go to different parts of the of our country, and particularly with reputed companies, big companies, they already have warehouses which are absolutely modern. They have lot of technology application in those warehouses. And if you remember the very first day, I said gradually there are different subjects which are becoming very, very important in terms of elasticity in demand, delivery of your choice, etc., etc. So, even warehouses and transportation also are applying, the companies are trying to apply a lot of technology, and this particular video that I am going to show you will give you some idea as to what technology does to a warehouse. It's amazing. I mean, you will see there's hardly any manual operations, almost everything is automated. So, we go to the video. So, you have seen a glimpse or a short, you have now an idea as to what modern warehouses look like. Warehouses are no more called a warehouse, many of them call it distribution centers. If you particularly if you think of the e-commerce, with the growth of e-commerce, the concept of distribution centers have gone up. Now, what is the difference between, just for your knowledge, what is the difference between a warehouse and a distribution center? In warehouse, shipments are only stored in a very systematic way, and it is stored the way they are received. In distribution center, on the other hand, there are a lot of other functions that happen. Lot of packaging is done, lot labeling is done, lot of sorting is done, a lot of transportation also happens within that. So, distribution center provides lot of additional benefits, because let me tell you, these e-commerce companies, they receive the materials or the products from the suppliers. Okay, if you remember, we discussed about postponement. So, not all the shipments are labeled or meant for a customer, they are brought in the distribution center, they are stored. So, as and when they get the order, and the shipments can be of the product, can be anything. It can be a food product, it can be telecom, it can be computers, it can be cell phones, it can be apparels, it can be shoes, anything. So, they are packed at the distribution center, they are labeled, they are scanned, and they are distributed. Now, if you see everything that you saw in that video, you saw the aisles, you saw the bays. What are bays? Bays are the racks where items are stored. So, there are two bays on both the sides where items are stored, and in between you have aisles. You also saw automated system of shipment being stored and also retrieved. We discussed about shipments being received and shipments being sent. We also had a short glimpse of how trucks, they are coming with the shipments and trucks leaving the warehouses with the shipments. So, it gave you the basic function of a warehouse. It also shown you with the basics in place how warehouses are becoming more and more automated. How much technology you saw, the application of technology. How many people you saw in the warehouse? Hardly any. It is all automated, it is all done by machine, it is all done by computers, it is all done by robots. Okay. So, that's the reason I say that don't restrict your knowledge to this particular course or whatever being taught in your colleges and the universities. They are very, very important, but look around and see where logistics and supply chain management is heading towards. So, now we go to our next subject, which is what is forecast? Forecast is predictions, right? We predict what may happen in the future. So far, forecasting was believed to be a marketing concept only. But let us just go back to our supply chain concept. What is supply chain is all about? We said that there is a company who is producing a car, right? So, company A producing a car. Before we go to the presentation, I would like to give you a brief idea as to why forecasting is a very, very important part of supply chain management. It is forecasting, based on forecasting, the company designs its supply chain management. It designs its logistics system, it designs its warehousing, it decides how much inventory, how much stock they should keep. They design how much shipment needs to be brought in and sent out. They have to decide how much labors are required. They decide what kind of material handling are required. Without forecasting, this is not possible. Okay. So, we said we have a car, company producing car, and there is a company who is a supplier to the car, who is producing tires, right. There is a company, I will take this a little bit towards right for you to view it properly. So, here is the car company. company A, company B producing tire, then there is a supplier to B, that is C, who's providing rubber to this company who's manufacturing tire. Without rubber he cannot manufacture tire. There is another company D who is providing some chemical. If I remember correctly, I read somewhere there is a chemical called butadiene or something like that. Okay. So, D who's producing or supplying some kind of a chemical, and if I remember correctly, that chemical, one of these ingredients is called butadiene or something like that. So, let us keep it to a particular chemical. So, if you see, a car has a supplier, the supplier has a supplier, the supplier also has a supplier. Now, everybody has a logistic system. The car has its own logistic system, it has its transportation system, warehousing system, inventory management system, material handling system. The tire company, it also has its own logistic system. Rubber company also has its own logistic system, it has its warehouse, it has its plant. Now, how do they decide what kind of a logistics and a supply chain system they should have? Based on what? So, the tire company is dependent on the car company to decide what kind of logistic system it should have, what should be his capacity, because car is his customer. Similarly, rubber, the company who is producing rubber, he also decides how much quantity rubber he should produce, how much he should stock, what should be his inventory management process, how much transportation it requires, etc., 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 depending upon whom? Depending upon his customer. His customer is the tire company. It depends upon the forecast this tire company makes, forecast on the number of tires he will make. The tire company will decide its supply chain function depending upon the forecasting the car company would make. He cannot produce tire just like that. He cannot decide I am going to make 50 lakh tires or 1 crore tires or 20 lakh tires. No, that will totally depend upon his customer, how much this customer, what is the number of cars he will produce. So, he is directly related. The same thing happens with this supplier. So, rubber is a customer of this company who is producing this chemical. So, his logistics or supply chain function or structure will depend upon what is he forecasting, how much rubber he requires, what is the quantity of rubber he requires in a particular month, quarter, year, 2 years, does not matter. So, now if you see, when he forecasts, the tire company would know how many tires to produce, he will know exactly how big warehouse, what should be the size of his warehouse, he knows where his warehouse should be, he should know, he will know how many warehouses he require, how to connect the warehouses, how much stock he should have, and all the other function will fall in place, whether it is material handling or packaging, all that automatically will follow. So, his entire logistics and supply chain structure, all of their supply chain and logistics structure depend upon each other. So, forecasting is definitely, for sure, is a very, very important part of the supply chain management. Okay. That is broadly the logic. Now, let us go to the next slide. What does forecasting does? Basically, strategic planning decision of supply chain. It helps us to do production, scheduling, inventory, aggregate planning, marketing, sales for allocation, promotions, finance, plant. All those decisions are interrelated. Unless the forecasting is done properly, none of these companies can do a proper planning. right. For simplicity's sake, I always give the example of kitchen, right. Now, how can our mothers decide how much to cook unless she does not know how many people are there to eat, correct? If there are 2 members or 20 members or 50 members or 5 members, so her plan of production or cooking or using the raw materials depends upon, when I say raw materials, all the ingredients required to make a particular dish. I use the example of kitchen just for simplicity's sake. The commercial world is much more complex, much more complex. So, all this decision making are based on forecasting. Let us go back. This is a very important slide, please note down. Forecasts are always wrong. It only gives you an expected value. Long term forecasts are less accurate than short term forecast. Aggregate forecasts are more accurate than disaggregate forecasts. What does that mean? We are doing a prediction only. Nobody is sure, nobody is certain about the future. So, we make prediction based on certain parameters that we will learn. We will go for a short break right now. When we come back, we will understand all the factors which decides how forecasting is done. What are the various approaches of forecasting? What are the factors that influence forecasting? So, it is always wrong, or rather than saying always wrong, it is not accurate. Long term forecasts, now sitting today, any forecast, not only business or commercial forecast, think of a weather forecast. Suppose it is much easier for me to say whether it is going to rain tomorrow rather than to say whether it is going to rain 1 week from now. Same with the companies, it is easier to predict what is going to happen in near future, tomorrow, a month, 6 months, a year, rather than forecasting what is going to happen 5 years from now. What will be the demand of his product from 5 years? I can probably, as a company, I can probably forecast what will be the demand of my product next year, because I have a good knowledge that the deviation from this year to next year may not be too high. Aggregated forecasts are more accurate than disaggregated forecasts. That means, if the GDP of our country is 7.5, for example, hypothetically, it is easier for me, looking at the trend, looking at the economic position, I can say the GDP of next year would be 7.4 or 7.25 or 8 aggregate, rather than telling what would be the production or what would be the growth for individual sector, engineering sector, food sector, pharmaceutical sector, different sectors. Same with a company, it is easier, for instance, Tata as a group, it is easier for them to say that my overall revenue next year will be 10% more, rather than comparatively to forecast the sale or the demand for its individual product, whether it is car, whether it is pharmaceutical product, whatever products that they are dealing in. So, aggregation, when you aggregate, it is easier. Think of your school or college. It is easier for me to say, I am just again for simplicity's sake to say that the average percentage in the examination was 82% on an average. It is very difficult to forecast, because I can see this year there has been the overall performance has been 80 to 85%. So, I can predict the overall performance for the next year would be on an aggregate, all the branches, all the divisions, arts, commerce, science, BTech, MBA combined would be this percent, rather than forecasting individual department or branches. So, forecasting as a whole, all these 3 theories, one, it is not always correct. Number 2, it is easier to forecast for a shorter period than longer period, and it is easier to forecast aggregate forecasting is much easier than doing disaggregating forecast. So, here we will take a break. Our next session will start at 3 o'clock, and we will complete our subject on forecasting in the second session. Thank you very much.